a time of fear and suspicion.
You choose to admit your crimes before man and God?
His coming was foretold. Now, he is here.
You know the signs.
You are bewitched.
He has the face of an angel,
Channel me a spirit.
the charm of the devil,
Hear me when I say he's evil. Evil absolute.
and the powers of a god. Satan also has one son.
Were you the first to have laid eyes upon the new Messiah?
Now, an enemy from his past,
Who appointed you executioner?
and a girl from the present.
You know what he's capable of.
Next time he's gonna kill me.
I'll not let him harm you.
Are the only hope for the future. This is the terrifying adventure that could set the world on fire. Warlock.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Cinema Arcade. This is the podcast about movies, video games, and the sparks that fly when those two worlds collide. This is our third week of our all-horror movie month, appropriately enough, in October. I think we're the first people to think of doing that.
I think we are the first
Pretty
people.
sure. We're watching horror movies in the month of October. It's kind of perfect synergy if you think about it.
Innovation.
Yeah. And today we're watching a movie that maybe some of you haven't heard of before. A movie called Warlock from 1988, 1989, 1991. All of the above.
Those years.
You can find all of them on that. My name is Steve Guntley. Who is joining me today?
I'm J-Ban.
Welcome, J-Ben. And Justin Wilhelm has been cursed by a warlock's blood curse, so he will not be able to join us today. Luckily, we were able to summon a familiar in his place. Who's joining us today?
Hi, I'm Christian Lewis, and I'll be joining y'all today.
Well, we appreciate you being here. Thank you so much, and we wish Justin a speedy recovery and many Limp Bizkit references in the future to come. I almost bought him a shirt.
What are we gonna do without all the aughts alt rock references?
I know. I feel like I'm not learning anything about Disturbed right now. Yeah, so that's a real problem. But hopefully Christian can fill that void. How much do you know about Limp Bizkit?
Not enough.
Okay, fair.
I could not fill that void.
Oh, well, we're very excited to be here talking about Warlock, a very strange and interesting kind of failed horror franchise in a way.
Is it horror?
That's the thing. I would argue that this first movie is kind of like a supernatural adventure film, but it gets labeled under horror.
I'll let you introduce, and then I'll do my commentary.
Yeah. Okay, absolutely. Yeah. Well, let's learn a little tiny bit about this movie. It was released January 11th, 1991. It was directed by Steve Miner and written by David Twohy. And it stars Julian Sands, Richard E. Grant, Laurie Singer, Mary Wolanov, and Rob Paulson. Now, first things first, I think the thing we need to talk about with relating to this movie is that if you know the name Julian Sands, if that's been coming up for you in your news feed lately, it's because we lost him this year under some pretty tragic circumstances. So a little bit about Sands. He was a classically trained British actor. He had his big breakout in the 1985 Merchant Ivory film A Room with a View, a very stately, classy, reserved kind of romance. And this led to a string of roles in movies like The Killing Fields, Arachnophobia, Boxing Helena. He's in Ocean's 13. He's in the Fincher Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. He was also an avid mountain climber and hiker in his free time, and unfortunately, he was out hiking in the San Gabriel Mountains in California this January when they got struck by some record flooding. He disappeared. It led to a months-long manhunt, and they finally, unfortunately, found his remains in June of this year. So it's very sad. Julian Sands died at 65 in kind of a horrible way. It's a horrible reason to have to keep seeing somebody's name in a headline.
Have you ever been to the San Gabriel Mountains?
Yeah, I mean, I live in the San Gabriel Mountains, so yeah, it's. I mean, yeah, it's a lot. There's a lot of mountain up there.
Yeah.
And, I mean, I know a lot of people are really passionate about it, but yeah, it's.
And it goes to show, I mean, he was an experienced, mountain climber. He'd done a lot of it, and
Flash floods are so dangerous.
They are.
I don't know. I haven't been to one out hiking, but I've definitely been out in flash floods while driving.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh fuck. I need to get the fuck out of here.
It happens scary fast, too. You think you're going to have time to prepare for it, and you really don't. So, R.I.P. to Julian Sands, an actor I've always enjoyed, and I think these movies were kind of an attempt to give him a star vehicle. They were really hoping these would take off. This movie was directed by Steve Miner, who's kind of like one of those guys. He's just like a journeyman sort of director who shows up and does a decent job and moves on. But he had a little heated this time because he directed a couple of the Friday the 13th movies, some of the better ones, I would argue, 2 and 3. And he was also a producer on the show The Wonder Years, so he had a little bit of swing right around this time. The script was an early work by David Twohy, a name I never really quite knew how to pronounce, but he would become very in demand a couple years after this because he wrote The Fugitive, which is a movie I rewatched recently, and that movie slaps. It is so good. Really holds up. He's also created all of the Riddick movies with Vin Diesel, so we'll be talking about those too.
Is it Chronicles of Riddick or the Pitch Black?
Pitch Black is
the first one. The first one was so good.
It's really fun, and there honestly, the video game version they made of the Riddick verse is the best thing associated with that entire franchise. It is so good, legitimately.
Ooh,
a great game.
That's a bold claim because I believe that Pitch Black is a solid movie.
Totally solid, really fun movie. But Escape from Butcher Bay on the Xbox is unbelievable.
Was there a Fugitive game?
There never was.
That's
no,
weird.
That seems like it would be a slam dunk, right? But I guess that The Fugitive was always pitched as kind of like a movie more for grown-ups, I guess. It was the counter-programming to your Jurassic Parks and your stuff like that from that summer. So I guess it would make sense. But also, we just played the Bram Stoker's Dracula game, so they didn't really have
They didn't have a rhyme or reason. Maybe,
they weren't really gauging
Maybe
that.
because it was based on a real story, they couldn't get the life rights.
Oh, right, yeah. Oh, yeah, that's right. We can't really do true crime video games, although that's probably around the corner, right?
Oh, I don't know. True crime video games? It's a slippery slope.
Yeah, I would say give me a fake crime video game. Like do a true crime patois, but with fake people. I don't want to actually be looking into real things. Miner and Twohy, they originally wanted Julian Sands to come in and play the character of Redfern, who's the hero. But because at that time he was best known as more of a romantic leading man type. But they enjoyed his campy take on the villain, and they gave him the role of the Warlock instead. And then Richard E. Grant came in and took on the Redfern role. I love Richard E. Grant. You pointed out, this is the second time we've played a Richard E. Grant video game after Dracula. Although it's not very clear if that's who that character is in this game, right? I don't know that that's.
I don't think it's the game. No, I don't think it's just supposed to be
a new guy, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, Richard E. Grant was hot off of a movie called With Noel and I. Did you ever see that?
No,
one?
I didn't.
Oh man, see, you lived in the UK for so long. That was a big cult film over there with. It was Grant and Paul McGann, who would be a future Doctor Who, and they're just like two drunks having conversations in the woods, and it's great.
I did read about this though, because this actor Grant, he can't drink alcohol because he doesn't have the enzyme to digest it.
Oh wow!
And the director of that movie made him, he becomes violently ill for 24 hours after he drinks alcohol. But the director for that film, and a classic example of a director overstepping his bounds, made him drink a half a bottle of vodka and an entire bottle of champagne, so he would know what it was like.
Horrible.
Yeah.
That's a horrible thing to do. Yeah, they drink so much in that movie. That's a horrible role to take on if you have that affliction. That's awful. The female lead here in this movie is Laurie Singer. You might best know her as the as the lead from Footloose, opposite Kevin Bacon. So that's the kind of only other place I've seen her before. But this movie was completed back in 1988. It was set to be released through Roger Corman's New World Pictures, but the studio ran into financial difficulties. They wound up shelving this for 3 whole years. It was picked up by an independent studio called Trimark, which gave it a small theatrical release. And it was not a hit in theaters. They kind of buried it in early January, didn't really market it very well. But this was kind of a secret cult hit on VHS. Like, people found it on the Blockbuster shelves. And the VHS grosses were enough to fund a sequel, which was 1993's Warlock Armageddon. Sands returns for the title role, but nothing else comes back. They basically just hard reset. They're like, all right, we like this character. We like nothing else. Let's just try again. And I watched the sequel as well, just because I had some free time. I'd never seen it before. And pretty fun, pretty gory. And it also is definitely aiming to be more of an actual, like, bona fide horror film than this one. The first one probably came across. This one, he's actually like a Freddy Krueger type, and he's jumping around from town to town. Like, he's killing people that he doesn't need to kill just to, like...
I would argue he does that in this movie.
I mean, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
No, I mean, like, not in like in a scary homicidal, I just kill for fun. Like, personally, I felt like I had a hard time feeling like...
It's like, I like your ring, let me murder you. Like...
Well, he chopped off his finger first, and then the guy had a problem with it. I think if he was just cool and just would have laid there, I think he would have left.
Just rolled with it and just be like, hey, guess what? Enjoy those fingers.
I don't know. I think this is... So, are you finished, Steve?
Oh, a little more. I'll just say that, like, Armageddon was not a hit, and so it kind of killed the franchise. There was one more movie called Warlock 3, The End of Innocence. It went straight to video in 1999. Julian Sands did not come back for that one. And that just stopped the franchise in its tracks. There's been no reboots. There's been no anything. And the one other thing that I think is kind of fascinating about this movie's legacy is that it seems to have inspired a real-life murder.
Oh.
This was in 1995 in Canada. There was a 14-year-old boy named Sandy Charles who had some undiagnosed mental health issues, and he was reportedly obsessed with this film and heard voices that told him he needed to perform some of the rituals from this movie. And so he and an 8-year-old accomplice murdered a 7-year-old boy. The accomplice was released for being so young, not really knowing what they were doing. And Sandy Charles was sent to an insane asylum for the rest of his life. He's still in one. But that case actually inspired Canada to start implementing V-chip controls in their TVs. I don't know if you guys remember V-chips, but like they used to put them in TVs as kind of sensors. Like, parents could have the passcode. It's like early passcode technology, basically.
Yeah.
Like, you could you put them in your TV, and then you can control what your kids watch. I think that was kind of the reason that became more widespread in Canada, was because of that case. It's a messed up case. Obviously, it's not the movie's fault, but it's
it's really interesting. I haven't heard about that case before.
Yeah.
It's always so tragic when, like, people are so young that they don't understand what's going on, but then they have lifelong consequences.
Yeah. I had to throw that out there just to bring everything way down.
Yeah.
I just wanted to bum everybody out. Bounce back from that one. Yes.
Okay.
Well, it wasn't the movie. I'll say that.
I don't think it was. The movie was much. So first of all, I feel like Julian Sands mentioned, like, when he got the script, that he really considered this more a dark comedy than a horror film, and
I can see it.
And I'm definitely, there's so many comedic elements to this. Like, right off the top, there's so much homoeroticism in this.
Yes,
it's just like they're smoldering the screen down. They're burning the screen down.
Yeah.
With homoeroticism, and it's just like, it's so, there's starting at the top, like, I don't know, the very, like, thumb and toe
the
restraint system.
What are those,
so
what
that
are those
he has
called?
to be
Thumb screws?
bent
Yeah.
over the entire time.
Yeah.
Little sketch.
That's the first time you see the Warlock, is back in 1691. And he is bound with this torture equipment and, like, bent over, like, touching his toes with his face. Like, it looks incredibly uncomfortable. Now, I can't bend that way, but it looks incredibly uncomfortable for everybody.
they actually did flip him another way that did look slightly better. So he did have two different bent over positions.
Yeah, they kick him over, and then it's like, oh man, that looks way more comfortable.
Both incredibly sexual positions.
They are, yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's nothing sexual about like a beautiful man being chained up in a room and like scowled at and kicked by a bunch of elders. Okay, there's nothing sexual about that.
In a tower, don't forget.
In a tower, can't forget the tower. Tower is very important. But all right, so here's the thing about this movie that's kind of unexpected. And I've seen this once before. Was this first time for both of you?
I think so.
Okay, yeah. So I'd seen this once before, and I didn't really pick up on this the first time. But this movie is basically reverse Terminator. This is going from the past to the future instead of going from the future to the past. But it's kind of the same thing. Two guys opposing like enemies get sucked through a portal back into modern day. The good guy has to team up with kind of a ditzy waitress, and the bad guy is just kind of wreaking havoc throughout. But there's always like this undercurrent of like sort of a fish out of water sort of humor coming from everybody. But it's basically just magical Terminator. And I'm not mad about it, but I think
I don't disagree with that assessment.
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna.
So it's about as much of a horror movie as Terminator is what I would say.
Terminator is much more.
Terminator is much scarier.
Much scarier.
Yeah, this one skews more on the silly, but I found it very pleasantly silly.
I
had a good time with it.
I feel like I think one of the issues is that Julian Sands is so charismatic that when you start watching this show, you're rooting for him. You're like, no, he's not that bad. And then he kills that poor man, and you're like, oh, he's not that bad. Oh, he kills a child for flying ointment.
You just think you can fix him, right?
Yeah, no, there's a sensation that you're like, oh, he's not, because like back in the day in Puritan times, people were, and I think that's something where this can be compared to the Vitch, or Witch. I still don't know. The Vitch is that they do use a lot of. So I studied when I was living in Scotland. I studied quite a bit of historical witchcraft trials, and like so the historical witchcraft trials, like in the Vitch, is like these are like the whole thing is like ointments of an unbaptized boy, like these types of things, like cursing people, like all these like really to the modern sensibility very silly.
Oh yeah,
the modern sensibility of what they at the time considered witchcraft. Well, and what people at the time also considered witchcraft to be silly as fuck.
Yeah.
Because people at the time were also like, this is stupid.
Yeah.
Even though some people were like, oh, no, we believe. But there was a huge amount of people at the time who were also like, nah, this is silly. But they often weren't the power. Like King James the second, I think. Was he the first?
I'll take your word for it. I don't know the kings.
So King James, 1 or 2, whatever happens to be the correct one, went off on a bender of witchcraft prosecution, and is sort of primarily responsible in empowering a lot of people to do witchcraft trials of killing like 40,000 people. But then later on, he's all like, people convinced him that witchcraft wasn't real, and so he stopped the witchcraft trials.
Okay. All right. So somebody in power listened to reason. That's unusual for that era. Yeah. I mean, eventually is still better than a lot of people do. But yeah, that's kind of the main plot here is that the Warlock, who is like explained to be the actual literal son of Satan, he escapes persecution in the 1600s and he flees to modern day, which is 1988. And he is pursued by Redfern, and that's Richard E. Grant's character. He's kind of the good druid, I guess, or the witch hunter who has been capturing him and chasing him for all this time. And so you get that nice little conflict going. And they cross paths with Cassandra with a K, played by Laurie Singer. I don't want to pick on her, but it's just like I feel like this character is kind of the worst part of this movie. So
this is something that drives me crazy, is that they in the 80s, in the early 90s, they always had horror movies where they had incompetent women who didn't know how to run. Yes. And they had definitely had that scene. Granted, she was supposed to be in her 50s. Oh God, it's not like a 50-year-old could run.
Right, yeah. Yeah, this movie has some real harsh ideas of what 40-year-old women look like also. We'll get to that, but yeah.
Well, you got to be fair. They're in Los Angeles and they're in Malibu, so they're going to be a little more strict than they're going to be maybe in the countryside.
I guess so, yeah. It's like, dude.
Los Angeles in the 80s and 90s, we're talking cocaine chic.
So we open and with Laurie Singer as being this sort of like party girl who lives with a gay man, and like they actually out and say that he's gay, though they say like a horrible like slur about gay people.
Yeah, she has a line that I was like trying to parse through my head. I'm not going to repeat it.
Yeah, I'm not going to repeat it either. It's but it's just like, so it was nice that they showed that he was a loving friend, but also they like there was like a bunch of, they queer coded the villain to be like sort of like a malevolent like
gigolo almost.
Yeah.
No, I weirdly, I actually like the depiction of a gay character in this like movie, because I've seen this happen in a lot of horror movies where, especially of this era, where they are just made like a stereotype or like a mincing, like a just being very stereotypical or flamboyant. And this is like a very reserved, like normal person who you feel sad about, like, he feels like
home.
He has a beautiful home, and he feels like a very well developed character in just the little brief time that he has. And that there's definitely that energy between he and Julian Sands when they see each other, and like that moment in the kitchen is kind of like, oh shit, this is like, yeah.
But Laurie Singer, was actually a child prodigy, musician. I think she was a cellist.
I believe so.
And I believe she might still be the youngest graduate of Juilliard.
Oh wow! I did not know that.
So she's like a badass motherfucker, musically speaking, before she transitioned to acting. And I read that she refused a lot of the prosthetics that they tried to have her put on, which I think is fair enough. I'm always really interested in the way they portray women aging, as though somehow there's this trope that somehow an old woman is terrifying. And
That's been a thing in the last couple years. It drives me crazy. You're like an old, oh my god, an old, like, it's like specifically a naked old woman.
Woman.
The most
You're
terrifying thing anybody can conceive of is 60-year-old breasts. Yeah. That's the most frightening thing in a Hollywood producer's mind.
Like they did that in It, the second episode of It, the new one, and it was just like so ridiculous, and you're just like, who cares? Like, honestly, you like go to Hippie Hollow for fuck's sake.
Yeah. No, but this Cassandra character, like, I feel like they just wrote her too dumb.
Yeah.
It's a hard ask to make you sympathize with like kind of dumb characters when they're not supposed to be dumb. I don't know, and maybe I'm being overly harsh on it, but I just feel like she didn't have a lot going on. Like, she's meant to be like a flighty 20-year-old like LA girl, but like they overdid it to a point where like she's just kind of unpleasant and just mean, and she grows a little bit over the movie, but yeah, she's just not very fun to spend time with.
What did you think of her, Kristen?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it was kind of annoying because it felt like she was set up, or at least I felt, I should have known the era, that she could have been more. Right, like there was this feeling like, okay, yeah, she's gonna help hunt this guy, and she's gonna come along for this journey, and yeah, she could still be who she is. She doesn't have to be ready to be a warlock hunter. Yeah. So she doesn't have to be, tuned to the battles of war. She could still be a valley girl from LA. But yeah, they struck the level of incompetence that came out of nowhere was unnecessary.
Right, it felt a little mean-spirited.
Yeah.
And like compare again, I'm going to be comparing to Terminator a lot, but compare it to Linda Hamilton in the first Terminator. It's like that's the movie before she gets the crazy biceps and becomes like the ultimate future warrior, but she still feels competent. She feels scared. She feels confused, but she still feels competent and basically intelligent. Like she's dealing with the situation as best she can. And here, I feel like she's trying to be too much of the comic relief, when the real comic relief is just Redfern.
Yeah.
Redfern is very funny. Like, Richard E. Grant is fantastic in this movie, I think. He's really committed. And they hit a lot of like fish out of water jokes without going too hard on them. It's not like, oh, what is this metal carriage? But
I was really surprised that they didn't hit it hard, because like I thought they were gonna hit it real hard. Like they'd hit it hard in Terminator.
Yeah. But like I think his character is meant to be like very focused on his mission. He knows he stepped forward in time, and then he's just like, all right, I accept this. Things are different. I'm just gonna roll with it and try and kill this witch as best I can.
I think that's what makes it work so well, is that he's not confused about that, and there's not. The joke doesn't get overplayed. I really loved actually the scene where the cops get called. Yeah. And it comes out and it's like, oh, how are they going to play this? Because it can be very like cheesy. Obviously, it's like, how is he going to deal with it? And he sees the cops. Yeah. And I was like, is he going to say, what are these things? And then he just like, he goes for the whip, and then he just like tries to whip at him. He's like, who are these guys? But it was like,
and they tase him, and it hurts.
But it was like a very. He played it so well. Like it was so believable to like I had never seen a cop, but also not playing like someone who had never seen a cop.
Right.
Like, it was very believable that he's like, okay, these are assailants. I can assume. Yeah. And I must defeat them so I can get to my goal. But it wasn't like, what are these guys?
Right, exactly. There were so many moments where they could have gone for that cheap joke. And like even when it's like when he's fascinated by the plane, it's not that he is like, oh my God, there's a metal bird over there. It's that like goodly men should not fly in the air. He thought it was like a form of witchcraft. And it's like, all right, I kind of believe that this guy would think these things. And like, I think he's really committed. I mean, he and Sands play really well off each other. Like you said, there is like a simmering tension, like a erotic tension between these two that never fully goes away. But that works. I mean, I think that's great.
If you follow somebody through time,
I'm just gonna. That's little thirsty.
That's it. That's
little thirsty. Yeah. Come on, buddy. Yeah, have a little self-respect. Let him come to you. All right. He's gonna come back with his dad. His dad's really rich. He's Satan. He owns a bunch of dealerships. I mean, so most of the movie is Redfern and Cassandra trying to chase the Warlock across the country, because the Warlock is trying to get the 3 pieces of the Grand Grimoire, which is this book that it's like the anti-Bible. And the idea is that he's going to unmake creation, which I think is, I like that that's more specific than just saying the world will end. It's not that the world will end, it's that the world will have never existed, and that an entirely new one is going to be created in its place, one that's dedicated to evil. Like, I like the specificity of that.
I did like the scene of being like, when he's talking to the spiritualist, and he's like, no, do better, demon. We're negotiating, and I'm a witch, motherfucker.
Another really good like horny scene. Like the channeler is very.
She's like basically like orgasming as she was channeling them, and it was like, oh my God, really? And it was just so stupid. And then I thought it was really fun how he's like, no, wait till the real Zemiel comes up. And then it's a little spooky.
And that's the interesting way I think this series could have really differentiated itself from like the Freddys and the Jasons, in that like the Warlock is a hot man. Like he has different access to different people than Freddy's not going to go in and try and seduce anybody. It's not going to work. It's just like you got glove hands. Like,
well, and I think this movie really could have worked if they led into being a little bit more
like seductive.
Anne Rice or Twilighty about it, just being all like, because you could have set him up as this anti-villain that was really compelling. Instead, you just like, they kept making him do evil things instead of like compellingly evil things, like things that are understandable.
He could have taken a thrall, he could have had like somebody who's like worshiping him or following him.
I just kept getting the sense that he was doing evil things, but he didn't feel evil, and I know he was evil. This is not me being like, I wasn't bewitched or anything. I felt like I was like, yeah, that's a bad thing. He shouldn't do that. But I didn't feel like he was an evil guy. I just feel like he was a guy doing. Do you know what I mean? Like this villains. You're just like, you're just.
With his conversation with the small boy, he just seems like a friend. He's be like, wow, this little boy is so cool, and I'm a friend. And then all of a sudden, you're like, oh, he killed him for his body fat. You know what I mean? It just it didn't seem like the scenes followed the intent of this previous scene. You know what I mean?
Here's my new pitch. Warlock is Kendall Roy from Succession. All right, he's a flawed fail son who is really, it's not his fault. It's not entirely his fault. He had a fucked up upbringing. You still sympathize with him even when he's doing evil shit. Yeah, there's something about him. I think that's part of the problem too. He never becomes fully monstrous either in this one or the sequel. Again, he kills a little boy and drinks his fat. I'm not endorsing that.
But it is a horror film. You expect horrible things.
Yeah.
But that's fair. You brought
that
up
happens
dad,
off screen. Yeah, the all of that stuff happens off screen. Most of the violent stuff happens off screen, except for the tongue biting. That was a good scene.
It's very Shakespearean.
Yeah, I think so.
So it was so interesting. So they're chasing the Warlock, and because he's getting the 3 pieces of the Bible MacGuffin or anti-Bible MacGuffin.
Yeah.
And they bring him to this beautiful fucking farm, and
the Amish farm,
Christian and I were like, look at those succulents. They had we paused it in this scene where they were just like the most beautiful rows of succulents, just being like charming and beautiful with this red barn. And I forgot, I looked up where they shot this scene because I was like, this is so beautiful. And I think it was George Washington Farrell house or something like that. It was
in Southern California.
No, I don't think it was. I'm not sure.
I don't know where they filmed this.
But and it was just like a beautiful repurposed farmhouse that does pumpkin patch rides.
Oh, amazing.
And so I'm just like, it's so beautiful. And I thought it was so interesting, that scene, because that scene's really the first area where we start to come face to face with the terrible CGI.
Yeah, okay. This is something I wanted to address too. A lot of these special effects in like 80s horror movies have aged in a very charming way because I love practical effects. I love just like having a bunch of goop and monsters and like it's clearly a puppet, but whatever. I prefer having something physically there. This is kind of like, this isn't even quite CGI. This is like somebody drew on the film stock. It looks like Disney. It looks like Mary Poppins is happening. Like he's conjuring like animation out of his hands. Some of the special effects are really laughable. The flying looks ridiculous. Because he's not in like a Superman pose, right? He's like standing upright with one arm over his mouth like Dracula and just like zipping along like that.
Which I have to say, when I saw that, I'm all like, it makes a lot of sense. Why wouldn't you fly like 3 feet from the ground as opposed to like 150 feet?
Yeah.
If you could fall, wouldn't you just rather just zip along the road?
Yeah.
And I thought that was so interesting. I was like, it never occurred to me that if I could fly like a superhero, I would just fly along a road.
You would just be at Segway height. Yeah, basically. Yeah.
Not to get into the specifics of flying and how, because
Please.
that's a whole nother separate subject.
I mean, you have to know what muscles to flex. I don't know.
Yeah. What are the physics? Maybe it's harder to fly higher. Maybe he's just like staying low. I felt like some of his, also his powers, I don't know, were not scary. And
because again, they're lacking specificity.
Yeah, they could have I don't know, if they knew the CGI wasn't going to be there, they could have wrote it differently. So that he just, he was lacking. And I think one of the things that really took him down actually is when we met Dad through the call, our guest Dad, and we got his mission, because then it felt like, oh, he's not the big bad, you know what I mean? And it's like, he is, but it felt like, oh, he's still in service. And so then you get stuck in the middle of like, okay, is he gonna turn and now we're gonna both go against Daddy, or is Daddy gonna are we gonna defeat him and Daddy at the end, or even seeing Daddy at all, or is it just like, do you know what I mean? Like
you could make it where he's like making a bid for the power of the throne or something.
So are we like, is he gonna be like, oh, he's gonna really go bad, or if there's this like, oh, maybe this Warlock is not, maybe there's some sympathy they want us to have for him.
Yeah.
I mean, again, this is a guy who killed a child, rendered his fat, and drank it, and we're still kind of saying like, he's like soft.
But if
he's like a soft boy.
If your dad was Satan,
yeah, That's like your Kool-Aid.
Yeah, that's light.
Yeah, that's not even that much. Yeah, no, I think that is kind of a problem. Like, while it's a performance I really enjoy, and I think like both he and Richard E. Grant are locked in, there is sort of a lack of specific malice or direction coming out of the Warlock, you know?
Well, and it's so interesting. They have this opportunity to build backstory with the story of Marianne, and they're just like they could have been like, oh no, he seduced her and turned her into a witch, or something. They just be, but they're like, Marianne was pure as snow, and then they just like drop it. I don't want to talk about it.
Right.
Yeah,
it was very silly.
Yeah, it started to set up like, and I felt like there was a scene where I thought they was going to set up that like in the past maybe there was a triangle going on. You know, there was like, oh, there's something that happened in the past between them that they're even more. You know, so they
were the first throuple.
Yeah,
they were the very first one. Yeah, they started early. Yeah, no, there should have been a little bit more stakes about that. Like, yeah, we of course, it's a lifelong trope of having men be motivated by the death of their beloved to, you know,
or by the betrayal of their brother.
It's a better motivation than a lady who's 20 and hates the idea of aging.
Now, okay, to be fair, all right, so Cassandra gets this curse placed on her where she's going to age 20 years every day, which means she will die within like 5 days, probably. She's 20 at the start of this movie. But yeah, the depiction of it's a scary idea. I could get that. Like, not necessarily the aging thing, but the dying suddenly.
Do you know what does this a lot better? Fucking Howl's Moving Castle.
I was thinking of Howl's Moving Castle a lot during this, because that was kind of a problem a lot of people had with that movie, where it's like you take it like a sprightly, energetic young heroine, and then you make her very old and very slow for most of the movie. And this movie doesn't quite go that far. They make her, she gets up to like 60.
Yeah.
With very silly looking makeup. The 40-year-old makeup, just like, they make her hair like 6 feet longer. It's dragging on the floor, and she has like a pimple and looks a little pale.
Yeah, and she has the audacity of having brown hair.
Oh,
the self-respect.
It is the greatest sin a woman in the 80s could commit. Yes. Otherwise, she's rocking the Daryl Hannah and Blade Runner kind of look.
But she's got the silver skirt and and I thought it was so interesting that they neither one of the men commented on her clothing the entire time, and I can't decide whether or not that's something that I like, or like, wouldn't you be like, dude, where's your clothes? Like, if you came from Puritan times,
because Redfern was a little judgy with her about like wearing makeup.
Yeah,
that was about the only thing he pointed out, though. Like, yeah, her ass is hanging out of a lot of these skirts, and I'm not complaining or anything. I'm just saying, like, he should notice something like that. I do kind of like that they don't get too hung up on that. Like, the Warlock never really feels like he's hung up by anything. He's kind of just fascinated by everything. But Redfern gets confused occasionally on how to enter a car or something like that. But that's really about it.
And they're like, and it's like, did she not turn the radio on the entire time they were driving?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I couldn't believe that they had gotten through that much of a road trip, and then they just, I mean, I can, but also I find it hard to believe at no point that they're like, oh, let's turn on the radio real quickly.
Yeah. I mean, I like that they even drop in little lines to indicate that he is actually smart. Like, she says, you know the Earth is round, right? And he's like, for several years now. Yes. Like, that's kind of funny. I kind of like that. He's like, yeah, you're trying to big dog me and you can't do it.
I definitely enjoyed that, because I think there is this idea that because of where we are, we know so much.
Right.
And I think this idea, if we meet someone in the past, we're like, oh, think of how smart we are. And there's a lot of information like that. They're like, no, that's long and widely been known and decided upon. This is not a frequent thing, but I think this idea, this wanting to show off to the people in the past, like, guess what happened here? That we, like, feeling like we know so much more. I mean, we do, but but I think honestly we'd be surprised like how much the average person does not.
And that's what helps make Redfern still feel kind of high status, even though he is in the fish out of water position. Like, she even says, like, she turns on the radio, she's like, no, there's not little people in there, and he's like, yes, I know that. Yeah, like you know, so he's, even by like the regular primitive jokes, he's not stupid.
Well, and he knows so much about his own wheelhouse. Like, he knows about how to capture a witch, how to put on those kinky thumb toe restraints, how to nail
stuff.
A lot of foot stuff.
He's bare. The warlock
has
is
an
barefoot.
OnlyFans, yeah.
The warlock is
Tickling.
barefoot the entire freaking series.
lot
Oh,
of
hang on. I just got a
poking.
message. Oh, Quentin Tarantino just said this is his favorite movie of all time. Interesting. Okay. Yes. Yeah. No, I do like the procedure of all of the witchy stuff that they're doing. Like, he's very specific in all his actions. He's got a little compass that he balances on a book that like will tell you where the warlock is. Like, he has a specific practice. Like, he's a member of CSI or something. And he's just like, this is how I find witches. And that kind of stuff is fun. I like that they don't even really bother explaining it to us. We just understand that he knows what this means.
Yeah. And so back when they get to the farmhouse and like they use the weather vane as a spear to make
vane
the
is
shot
great.
the shot of the century.
What a ridiculous shot.
To stab him in the back while he's flying.
That was an Olympic javelin throw. And then he
Yes.
misses all the other ones, which seemed a lot more realistic.
Like, that was the hard one to hit.
Yeah. And then we hit him like from the back.
Yeah.
And listen, I'm not gonna replay it and go back and forth, but there was no way. It would have to curve.
Yeah. This is like the new magic bullet theory. Like, I think there was a third shooter on the grassy knoll. There was a third weather vane thrower. That scene in particular is where the special effects are really creaking, like, because it's clear that Julian Sands is just in like a cherry picker and they're dragging Richard E. Grant behind him through a field and they're keeping the camera just close. It's like, you're clearly on a truck, dude. I don't know what to tell you. Like, this is campy and this is funny, but I'm not buying it. So I definitely suffered from having like this kind of low budget, but I don't know, man. I kind of got on board with this movie. I thought it was pretty
I thought
fun.
it was so fun.
Yeah.
I laughed my ass off on a number of occasions. And I also, like, he's just so charming.
Yeah.
Everyone is so charming, except for, so I think Laurie Singer is very pretty.
Yeah.
And she has her moments, but I feel like her part is the least written. If they had written her as a stronger lady, but I do think it's really funny that she gets like cock block at the end where she's just like, kiss me, and he kisses her on her eyes and he's like whirls away to his tomb because he's not like, I could kiss you or I could fucking die, peace out.
Boom. Yeah, that's the thing. I was not buying any kind of romantic tension between those two. Like, I didn't think it was going in that direction because
But
they
somehow
didn't
they
seem to
made
have
her
that vibe.
simp for him at the last possible minute.
Well, of
It was the eye kisses.
Oh, I was thinking it was the coyote pelts, but either way, yeah, he's rocking
Coyote
those.
Pets had to smell
He's
after all they've
rocking
been
them
through.
pelts.
They didn't try to change either one of their clothes the entire time.
No.
And everyone was just like, I'm fine with it. I'm fine with you walking through a 1989 airport without shoes on.
Yeah, just right up to the gate. Yeah. I mean, yeah, they've got all kinds of weird details, like him salting the leather and then drooling all over it in the car.
They never did anything with that.
I mean, well, that's how we established that salt kills
Yeah,
the
that's
warlock,
true.
But like still,
And
like,
he had the whip. He didn't get
Yeah.
any good shots on it, but
He didn't hit with the whip though.
But again, we spent so much time
But
like
that's
watching
how
this
they
guy
did
like
capture
lick
him
and
with
salt
the
this.
whip, and then they flew, and then he was like.
Oh yeah,
Okay, so yeah, and that's the problem. So I did enjoy it, but I did feel like there was maybe one or two like scenes drawn out too long in the chase where I felt like
Oh,
there was
yeah.
just like, I was like, we got it. We're chasing them. We could have got there in just like one or two more less steps.
yeah. I mean, it's definitely like a minor recommend for me. Like, it's not like, this is not a drop everything and go watch this movie kind of movie, but it's, it's a fun, I call them laundry movies mostly, but like, it's a fun, like doing laundry movie. It's a fun background film, because you don't need to pay super close attention to pick up the gist of it. And you get some really fun performances. You get some campy, bad special effects. And there's a couple of solid moments in this movie. Are we ready to talk about the game?
I believe we are.
All right, let's move on to Warlock the Game, which was released May 26, 1995, way after this game or the movie was made. It was developed by Real Time Associates, published by Acclaim, and it's available on Super NES and Genesis. Now, I will say it's a testament to this film's kind of slow-growing VHS cult success that this would have a game that much longer after the movie came out. This is even 2 years after the sequel, so it's not really even in the zeitgeist at this point. And I would say the game kind of combines plot elements of both movies, because the MacGuffin in the second movie are the 5 or 6 rune stones that he needs to bring about the Armageddon, and that's your collectible in this game. And your character is kind of coded to be like a Redfern type, but he's not expressly named. I think they just refer to him as the Druid. And but he doesn't resemble any of the characters in the second movie either. So I think that's who he's supposed to be.
I think it's so funny that we talk about, so like in Warlock, he wants to unmake the world.
Yes.
In Warlock 2, he wants Armageddon. And like in the Vitch, all the devil's offering is a taste of butter.
Yeah. It's slightly smaller stakes. Yeah, that baby got ground up for some butter. Yeah, no, and again, it's just like, I liked the specificity and the imagination of unmaking the world, and then the second one's just like, oh yeah, he's ending the world. You know, it's back to that. Like, we're not going to bother too much with what this is, because he's obviously not going to succeed. But this game is a side-scrolling platformer, an action platformer game. It kind of moves sort of like the cinematic action games of the time. If people are familiar with Flashback or Another World, it's got kind of like this slightly delayed, like they put like more pixels in there than they need so they can get some more accurate like cinematic movement, but it makes things a little stiffer, a little slower than like a Mario game. So I was getting a little bit of that. But you're playing as like a druid, and you have a basic lightning attack, and then you have a couple of spells. And once again, we're learning, like with games of this era, if we don't have the manual, we're just going to be so confused for so much of what's going on. Like,
you have an orb.
You have an orb.
And we were like, we played this game like for a good amount of time, but we didn't find out until later that you could throw the orb up to get potions.
Yes.
And we're like, God damn it.
No, we were having that frustration because Christian especially, we came by that one little ruin that had a potion sitting on top, and you were getting frustrated trying to get it down. There's no way to jump up that high.
Yeah, I'm like to the point in playing any video game that if I see an item that you're supposed to get or be able to get, then I obsess over it. I'm like,
right.
I know I should be able to get up there, and this game. Since you don't know anything, you just like there is no key. You should have assumed that you have all the tools that you need to get said item.
Right.
Yeah. Except without the information.
There's no in-game tutorial or anything indicating that. So like if you don't have the manual, you're screwed. And it's not like in modern games where you can assume that you're going to backtrack. You're going to come back later with a power that'll help you access this thing. Like you're not going to come back in this game. So like, it would be nice to know.
They had the system of passwords, which I don't think we've played a game with the password system.
Yeah, I don't know if we have. Maybe Roger Rabbit had it, but we obviously need to save our progress in that one. Yeah, we need to
most
memorialize
hated game
that.
of all time.
Yeah, I always hate password systems. I know they were a necessary evil of the time, but I used to have like notebooks full of these little obscure codes that I would have to try and remember what they were. The ones in this one were like, I think they were trying to code like rock bands in there. Because I was looking at a list of all the different codes, and one of them was like NRVANA or something like that. Like there was a Bruce Springsteen looking one. There was a Billy Joel looking one. I'm like, all right, I think they're just trying to do bands.
I would not be surprised.
Yeah, a bunch of like Gen Xers.
For fun, yeah, just why not? I mean...
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Gen Xers who still care about rock music, which is not a thing that exists anymore. So it's a pretty standard game. I like the Warlock is kind of persistent throughout the game. It's not like he's just like one mini boss. He's kind of just popping in to torment you every once in a while.
I like that, and they clearly got the rights to Julian Sands. Yeah.
His face appears when you die, and you get a little voice clip of him calling you either a fool or a fools or you lose. We couldn't quite make out what exactly he was saying. And then the other one he said, is that the best you can do?
Yeah.
But that one was clear enough. They clearly put a lot of time into animating his hair blowing.
So much time into
they got that
animating
right.
his hair.
He's got an incredible head of hair in that second movie in particular, because it's like fully receding, but also still very long and very like
He
flowy.
looks like Draco Malfoy's
He's
father.
very much like a Malfoy. Yeah, he's a Malfoy cousin or something like that. Yeah, it's definitely his look. They upgrade his look in the second movie too with like they give him a suit. They give him like an Armani suit with a turtleneck, which was like the very 90s look.
That's it. No, he is definitely a Malfoy. Like that.
Yeah.
That just no. Like the
exactly
type of magic he's doing. Like he's evil, but obviously he's doing evil things. But I'm like, do I feel like you're scary? Like I feel like you could be defeated.
Yeah.
You're just doing evil stuff. Like I don't. You're not the big. Yeah. That's a perfect. Yeah.
I want to confront J.K. Rowling about this issue and no other issues.
Yeah. No.
Other than that, I have no problem with her. But she clearly ripped off something from Warlock 1989, and I'm upset. No, yeah. So like, I like that he's kind of this persistent antagonist. Like, well, he'll show up and he'll just like blow out a bridge, or he'll animate a bunch of hedge animals to attack you.
Shoot some lightning at you.
He'll shoot some lightning. So like, yeah.
I thought the villains, they're definitely a varied amount of villains in this. Animated gargoyles, little dragons, ghosty things that shoot ectoplasm.
Yeah.
The ever-present bats. That seems like, I think maybe 5 games we've played so far this year have had like malevolent bats.
Yeah, 80s and 90s video game developers hated bats so much.
I think there were a fear though. I think there had to have been something going around with bats at that time. I think there was a heightened fear around bats.
I wouldn't be surprised.
I think there was a like a scare about rabies.
Yeah.
But I have no idea if that was like a craze or what. But then
I vaguely remember a guy dressing up as a bat and fighting crime sometimes. That was kind of a scourge, I remember, for a bit.
Yeah.
People, I always felt he was a hero, but some people labeled
also
him a
homoerotic.
vigilante. Deeply homoerotic. We're going to get to those.
What?
Yeah, no, but I mean, it's a pretty basic platformer, but weirdly, we got farther in this game than in most of the ones we played, and this was not a super easy game.
It wasn't a super easy game, but was definitely like we got quite far in it, and it was definitely it never felt too difficult. It never felt oppressively difficult. We were cracking along at a good pace.
Yeah, once we figured out how we could use our spells to like kind of heal ourselves a little bit or give ourselves a little lightning shield, something like that. Like, because your basic bolt attack doesn't really do much. Your enemies are generally pretty strong, even like the kind of basic like walking around enemies. But yeah, there were some like light boss fights and things like that, but nothing too oppressive. You know, I feel like this is a game that it's old school hard, but it's beatable.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you can go through it.
And even I think I'd say it's even more forgiving than a lot of old school hard in the combat system. I think you could take quite a few hits and heal and be okay. Like we got pretty far without really employing the roll and kind of dodging the hits. I think we were doing a lot of just like tit for tat, just kind of shooting at each other.
Right.
Not a lot. Not a lot of skilled playing, but to get that far with being able to just kind of hop in, I think that's great because I think sometimes in those games. You get like 2 hits and you're done. You got to restart. And I was surprised that it was like, oh, okay, we have a little bit more than that. And
the health system was so weird. Instead of having hearts, you had like this face, and then you sort of became a skull by how many times you got hit. So there was never any way to know for sure like how many hits that you had left.
Yeah, that's classic like mid 90s video game. That's like the Doom guy getting bloodier and bloodier as his health gets lower. Like that's a very classic thing. But yeah, I would say it was fairly generous. It was probably like 7 or 8 hits before you turn into a fully flayed skull.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, something like that. So it's little things like that kind of make things workable in a game like this. You know, look, this is not ambitious. This is not a terribly original or like particularly great game, but I had a solid enough time with this one. Like this could have been a disaster.
I think that's the secret. It's a solid. It is a very stiff game.
Yeah.
It was very stiff. But considering some of the crap that we've played,
especially for something coming like 2 years after the property had left the zeitgeist, like nobody was really like clamoring for a Warlock anything.
Good music too.
It's solid music. Yeah, solid
music.
like little haunted housey kind of jazzy music, you know. And
synthy.
yeah, and it has very little to do with the subject matter, you know, like in terms of like it's not following the plot of any of the movies that I know of, unless that third one goes really weird. But but yeah,
just like gothy side scroller.
Yeah.
Just just gothy vibes. You really don't even need a story. I mean, you see there is story happening. There's like a scroll you can read, but it's like
you get a little animation every time you get a stone, and it makes it fly around looking like a cereal piece.
It looks like you're decapitated as you celebrate.
Yeah, you're doing like a praise the sun kind of gesture where you're like leaning your head all the way back, and it just looks like his head fell off. It looked like a Mortal Kombat animation. Yeah, but I mean, I think that's about it about Warlock. Did you guys have any other takes on that one? I think we're good to move on to our rankings.
I think we're good to move on to our rankings.
All right. Well, each week we are ranking the games and the movies that we just watched on a scale from good movie, good game to bad movie, bad game. Where are we falling on Warlock? How about you, Javen?
Oh, this is difficult. I think because I don't want to use the word good.
Yeah.
In either sense. I think it's an okay movie with entertaining aspects and an okay game with entertaining aspects. But I especially compared to something as much as I loved Addams Family, or a couple of the other games that I loved, I just don't know. I think it's okay. I'm going to say okay.
That's the thing. It's like on the structures of our scale, I want to say it's a good movie, good game, but it's kind of like the barest possible minimum over the bar for both of them.
Well, I feel like we've got a bit of Stockholm syndrome going on.
A little bit, yeah. I mean, we've been playing some bad ones. We're coming off of a good, decent enough run. But yeah, we've played a lot of bad ones. We have, and this one was just slightly more competent and slightly more fun. Both of them were, like the movie and the game, are just slightly more competent and more fun than they needed to be. So I'm giving it kind of the dummy prize. These are neither of these are drop everything and go watch this / play this, but it's like, hey, if you got free time, want to check it out, it's probably fine. Christian, where do you fall?
Yeah, I don't know. I think the word that comes to my mind was fine.
Yeah, fine.
I wasn't offended.
No.
I can go for an inoffensive game. Especially in the style, I think that you come across this movie and or game, is probably the factor that will determine how you feel about it. I think casually watching, casually playing, is fun. I mean, if you saved up a whole bunch of money and your time to do it, you might be a little disappointed. But I think, for what it was, from working with the budget and then coming out with the game that much longer, later, they could have done worse. They could have easily done worse.
They really could. Yeah. We've seen better movies get worse treatment. Yeah.
What did you think of the movie?
It wasn't good, but I want to say I liked it.
I think that's sort of where I fall too. I'm not going to say this is a great movie or anything, but it's pretty fun.
I liked it as well. I was entertained, and it's it's one of those movies that I think it's like so. There's a hidden gemness to it that watching it with friends makes it so much fun.
Yeah. It's just campy enough without being stupid, and it's just like kind of savvy enough to be entertaining. It's got a slick production. The special effects suffer a bit, but it's a decent time. It's a decent old time. Well, thank you everybody for listening. Thank you, Christian, so much for coming here and for talking about Warlock with us.
Of course.
Oh, we were so happy to have you finally. We've been bugging you to be on the show for so long.
Yes. I'm glad I could make it out.
Next week, we are going to be concluding our month of horror, and I'm excited to get into this one. A movie that I think is going to split us a little bit, a game that's probably going to split us a little bit, because we're going to be talking about The Blair Witch Project. That's right.
Make me watch The Blair Witch Project.
Oh boy. Okay. Oh, all right. We're gonna have a take already. I'll reserve my take for this time, but yeah. All right. I'm excited to get into it. Blair Witch Project, a recent game, I think from 2019, something like that I have not played yet, and a movie I've seen 30 times. So I'm excited to get into this. So we will see you next month for Spooky Blair Witch. Don't go in the woods, or do. We're going to be there.
Next week.
Did I say next month?
Yeah, you did say next month.
I know words. I know things. I know eras of time. I did just time travel from 1691, so I'm a little jet lagged. All right, everyone. We will see you later. Bye-bye.